everyone, and welcome to another episode of Office Hours. I noticed the other day that I always have the same intonation when I introduce a show, whether it's Office Hours or Hot for Teacher or Far Verona or Roll20 Presents. The way that I say hello at the beginning of a stream is always the same. And I guess that's normal. I guess that's just the way that speech patterns develop. But ever since I noticed it, it's made me really self-conscious. I've been like, oh, here we go. I'm going to say it the way I always say it. Hello, everybody, and welcome to a brand new episode of Office Hours. I'm Adam Colwell. This is episode number 89, number 89, big 89. I am so glad you're here. We're going to talk about role-playing games today. I know. It's a topic I don't often cover here on my channel. We don't do a lot of talking about role-playing games, but I thought I'd branch out from whatever my normal content is. We're going to talk about RPGs, and the way that we're going to talk about RPGs today may be familiar to you if you are a longtime fan of Office Hours, or maybe you just watched Hot for Teacher and you're like, what's this other thing? I'm going to answer 3 questions today from you. Well, from you if your name is Jordy, Nico, or Jose. If you're Jordy, Nico, or Jose, I'm going to answer your questions today, but hopefully these questions provided by those 3 fine individuals will also help you with your tabletop RPG situations. So every week I pick 3 questions from my somewhat lengthy list of questions, and we answer them. We talk about role-playing games. If you have a question for me, if you're watching this and you're like, how do I get Adam to talk about the things that are plaguing me in my role-playing games? It is simple. www.adam-coble.com. Click on the Office Hours link, fill out the form, record your voice, or don't. It's fine. I prefer it when you do because I like to be able to hear you, but it's okay if you don't want to or you don't feel comfortable. That's all right. Submit your questions. They get added to the list, and every week I'll pick 3. And here we are, and it's episode time. Before we start, I want to call out in between episode 88, which I'm pointing behind me because that's the past, and today I'm pointing down because that's here where we are. In between those episodes, a fan, Jeeves Bunn, created this very amusing and somewhat offensive to me personally as a person bingo card. So this is the Office Hours bingo card. It is yours to enjoy. If you're watching this in chat, you can type !bingo and you can get your own bingo card. Unfortunately, if we're all working off the same bingo card, everybody wins all at once. It's not a very well-designed game, but it is pretty funny if you're a common a viewer, if you watch regularly. And now I'm all self-aware of all of these things that I do. So all I need to do to complete this is, let's see, remind you to talk to your players. I need to have the camera. Nope. See, now I can't even make it because this is a much better camera. Anyway, enjoy the bingo. Thank you, Jeeves. I just wanted to call that out. It's very amusing. And also, you're the worst. So let's get started. Our first question today, as I mentioned, comes to us from Jordy. And Jordy's question, I think this question could fit just as well on Hot for Teacher as it does Office Hours. This is very, very much a crossover question. And so I'm gonna end up answering. I'm gonna answer this both as a relationship question and as a tabletop role-playing game question, because honestly, it's pretty deeply both.
Howdy, Adam. I've returned to my college town recently after a year-long absence. I'm taking over as Dungeon Master again, and we're picking up from our last campaign, following a time skip. Leading up to the start of the campaign, I made a joke on Facebook where I said that they should all be mad at me after the next adventure. It was a pretty standard evil DM joke, I thought. Well, one of my players took the joke very seriously. She said that she wasn't going to play in any campaign which made her mad, but she was too emotionally fraught for that right now. I tried to set her fears to rest. That had all just been a joke and she needn't worry. She didn't believe me. She told me exactly what was going to happen, that something was going to go wrong with her beloved character, the one who got to have a happy life that she didn't get to have. That she would lose her in-game husband and daughter. Then I told her that I would make sure that nothing upsetting happened to her or her character, that I would ensure the game content wouldn't be triggering. She refused. She said she didn't want me to change the game content just for her. This player is currently going through a sudden and messy divorce and suffers from depressive episodes where she isolates herself. She also happens to be my ex-girlfriend, and I'm very aware of how deep her depressive episodes go. When we were together, I would go out of my way to help her, do anything to set her at ease. It was, in retrospect, an exhausting relationship, and it took a long time for me to find myself again afterwards. Now I've moved on, and I want us to be friends, but I'm not willing to give up my own mental health for her anymore, even to keep her in my Dungeons & Dragons game. In the short term, how do I remove the fear of upsetting content when there is none to remove, and going forward, how do I balance the desire to keep friends at the table without giving up too much of myself to keep them there? Thanks very much, Adam.
Boy. So you see what I mean? Jordy is having both a hot for teacher issue and an office hours issue. There is a lot going on here, right? There are layers. This is maybe among the most complex crossover hot for teacher office hours related questions we've ever had, in the sense that there's a bunch of like authority stuff, there's relationship stuff, there's emotion stuff, there's like taking care of yourself and other people stuff, there's game stuff, there's like dungeon mastering, like actual dungeon mastering stuff. It's a trauma lasagna. That's a great way of putting it. And I think that I have to say, Jordy, you're doing good, even if it might not feel like it, even if it might feel like the correct thing to do is like bend over backwards, fix everything. Like you're holding on to trying to make the best out of this situation, and holy, is it a messy one. Yeah. So it's not easy. It's not easy at all. So I just want to acknowledge, like, Jordy, the thing that really, like, I want to congratulate you on, or I want to like reinforce here, is taking care of yourself, right? Recognizing that you need to balance your own well-being against the well-being of other human beings in your group, right? At a person level, right? You recognize the game and its value to you as a person, and you have clear boundaries, and you're not willing to let somebody else bulldoze those. So nicely done on that level at the very least. You need to take care of yourself. I think also, and this is the through line, right? This is a question of having empathy. To successfully, and by successfully I mean without harming anyone, to successfully navigate a situation like this, you really, really need to have empathy. You have to have empathy for yourself and what you need to be happy and comfortable. You need to have empathy for the person who is dealing with their trauma, right? You have to balance those against each other, because sometimes it can feel like if you're taking care of yourself at the expense of someone else's needs, you can feel selfish and it can be a whole thing. So keep working on that. And there are other people at the table. This is not a one-on-one game. If this were a one-on-one game, my advice would be fucking stop. Just don't. Right? But it's not. You've got other people. They're all part of this thing. You obviously have a close personal relationship with this person that might be getting kind of conflated with your responsibilities as a dungeon master. Right? And so whichever way you go from here, Jordy, go forth carefully. Right? Now, when I was looking at this question and deciding whether or not to try to answer it on air, I was trying to think about what would this question look like if it were coming from the person who Jordy is talking about, right? Jordy's player in this group. What would this question look like if it came from her, right? Where I wanted to, again, and kind of empathize with the other people in the situation. So she's in this position, right, where she finds value, ostensibly social value. It can be distracting to play a game. It can be reinforcing to be around your friends, right? She's playing this game because, how did Jordy put it? Her character, her beloved character who got the happy life she didn't get to have, would lose her in-game husband and daughter, right? So very, very much clear and evident wish fulfillment, right? Fantasy life. But because her own personal situation is so nebulous and difficult, she's projecting safety into a space where none exists. And that's dangerous because if something bad happens to me, right? So imagine that all of a sudden my husband, my husband Throndir, let's imagine that my husband decides to break up with me and then I lose my job and then, I don't know, I get hit by a bus and I break both my legs. If I'm in that position, I'm sitting here alone wishing that Throndir was here to take care of me and that I didn't have 2 broken legs and that I still had a job and I wasn't worrying about the future. If I'm sitting there wishing for those things and I'm in the hospital, I can shake my fists at heaven and I can curse God and I can say, damn you, God, for putting me in this position, you stinking deity, you wrathful fuck. How dare you do this to me, right? You can't do that in real life, right? Because God doesn't care. God's not real. But you know what is real? Your dungeon master, right? Jordy is real, right? And so what's happening is that because, and I'm not a psychologist. When I say what's happening, I'm saying from my perspective, this is what I'm seeing, not like clinically what's going on. But what I'm seeing here is that Jordy's friend, this person in the group, is projecting all of those needs for safety into what feels like a more controllable environment than her own life, right? In life, you are the character. Somebody else has your character sheet, if you want to imagine it this way. Somebody else has your character sheet, and they're maneuvering you through the world, and you have no access to the mechanisms of being alive, right? I don't know what my dexterity is. I don't know if today's stream, if I'm going to roll a 10 plus or a 20 plus, I don't know if I'm going to critically fumble it before going in. I don't have access to the math, and that can make the real world seem really scary. People are unpredictable. We don't have constrained environments to understand the fundamental laws of the universe outside of like math, I guess, but you still can't use math to figure out what people are going to do. Usually math is pretty powerful. The point I'm trying to make is she is looking for places that she can control her narrative, and role-playing games feel like sometimes a place you can control that narrative. And what she's trying to do here is feel like she has an environment in which she is able to predict and control the universe. And on top of that, she has access to God in a way that the real world never will, right? And in this case, God threatened her. Or at least she felt like God did, right? When you posted on Facebook like, oh boy, get ready, you're going to be so mad at me after the next adventure, which is the kind of bullshit DM joke everybody makes. I do that all the time, right? It's a fun little joke. It's a little challenge to the players. Like, get ready, it's going to be a rough one. And then they beat you and you're like, you're all so tough and cool. And everybody has a good laugh and you're good to go, right? But what happened here was God, right? God on high looked down at this person and said, that thing that you love, that stability you think you need, that one thing you have that feels stable in your life of chaos and shit, better watch out. Better watch out. Not so safe. Not so safe after all, right? Which can be terrifying if she's placed a lot of emotional energy into the game. Now, I don't want to sound like someone's mom from 1985 here. When I talk about Dungeons and Dragons having influence over people, I mean it in a good way most of the time. I think that role-playing games can be a place to explore things like gender, like escapism. I think that the game gives us a chance to be social in a way that we can't otherwise. But if you are investing your own personal well-being and safety in a game like Dungeons and Dragons, as especially Dungeons and Dragons, you should probably take a step back, right? Like, you should probably step back from what you perceive to be a happy life you didn't get to have. Because if your Dungeons and Dragons character is happier than you are, that's a problem. And I guess, again, we're not really talking to Jordy here. And Jordy, don't worry, I'll get back to you. But there's nothing safe about Dungeons and Dragons. There's nothing, like, nobody's Dungeons and Dragons character should ever be in a position where their life is more stable and more comfortable than the person playing them. It's ludicrous. These are people whose entire purpose is murder and thievery. A Dungeons and Dragons character that has a happy life, a husband, and a daughter needs to rethink their career. So this is, in a way, a fundamentally office hours question, because there are other role-playing games that will be better suited for this, right? Like, Jordy, what you would need to do to remove all of the anxiety-inducing content from Dungeons and Dragons would be to take your DMG off the shelf and hurl it into an open sewer. Because there is nothing in that game that creates safety or comfort. Fucking nothing. Now, it's very easy to play a role-playing game and ignore the game and just make believe that we are playing happy elves and cheerful tieflings and not depressed humans. But that's not what that game is for. It is a box full of knives, and you are jamming your naked arm into it. You're gonna get cut, right? And if you take all the knives out of the box, it's not Dungeons and Dragons anymore, right? So, role-playing as an activity for thinking about your life, thinking about narrative, telling a story with your friends, a creative endeavor, etc., whatever, all of that stuff is possible, but Dungeons and Dragons is not a game about that, right? You cannot promise this player there will be no triggering or upsetting content in Dungeons and Dragons, right? We can take safety tools and we can apply them. Imagine this game, right? Imagine if this player were playing, I don't know, Tomb of Annihilation, and you were playing this even with safety tools. You have an X card in the middle of the table. Every time this player feels anxiety that their character, their beloved character with the happy life they didn't get to have, is in danger. You can't see it. I'm touching the X card, right? They're going to reach for that X card because the game doesn't encourage that stuff. And if you try to bend the game so that nothing bad ever even risks happening to the characters, why play that game at all, right? So this isn't. And Jordy, I'm so just so thankful that you brought this question here to Office Hours, because I promise you that there are other venues. If you posted this on, I don't know, the Dungeons and Dragons subreddit, you would get a lot of people being like, she's just being sensitive. Kick her out of your game and just do whatever you like. This is a person. This is a human being. It's a person that you care about. It's a person that we all should care about because they're a person. At the even most baseline level of empathy, there is someone who is suffering, and she is trying not to be suffering. She is trying to have an experience that is safe and gentle and caring, and Dungeons and Dragons is none of those things. None of them. Zero. There is nothing safe about Dungeons and Dragons. There is nothing inherently caring. There is none of that stuff is there. Now, your group may well be caring, gentle, safe individuals, right? These may be people who are really great to be around, who are comforted by each other's presence. And what they really want is to just tell a story about a bunch of people who run like a fantasy food truck. But Dungeons and Dragons doesn't want you to run a fantasy food truck. Dungeons and Dragons will burn down everything you love and force you to become a murderous maniac with no connections to the real world, pillaging dungeons and killing people for the things that they own in an effort to fill the emptiness of your soul, right? Dungeons and Dragons characters are not kind and gentle inherently, mechanically. So I'm going to encourage you and this group and this person to keep role playing, right? I'm going to encourage you to keep meeting, keep playing games, talk about these things together, and give this person space to play games with you, right? Just try a different game. And it doesn't have to go very far. It doesn't have to be like, we're going to discard Dungeons and Dragons forever and we're only going to play, I don't know, Fall of Magic. You don't have to go that far. There are games that are similar to D&D but are less terrifying in that sense, less likely that death is on the table. Because what's really a question here, what's really causing all of this is establishing what's at stake. Play Ryutama. Play Golden Sky Stories. Ryutama, you're cute, but there's still violence in Ryutama. If you play a game in which this person can play someone, play Tales from the Loop, right? Tales from the Loop explicitly says you can't lose your character. But I think there's a deeper, more hot for teacher level question here. This person is not in a position to do anything emotionally risky. Because like me and my relationship with the bearded tyrant that lives in the sky, I don't trust God to take care of me because he doesn't exist. But you know what I mean. And in this case, even though you have apologized for your evil joke and you have assured this person, hey, I get that you're going through some stuff, but I'm not going to hurt you, right? I will not use the game to hurt you. The problem is, motherfucker, you can't make that promise because D&D is all about people getting hurt. And on top of that, she doesn't trust you. And that's not your fault, Jordy. I'm not saying you're an untrustworthy person, but sometimes people have baggage that prevents them from reaching out and trusting people. And I hope that this person has access to therapeutic counseling that can help her get through her real life stuff. Because again, if you're in a position where you are envious of the life of your role-playing game characters because your life is bad and their life is good, you need to do work to get out of that place, right? Like, I enjoyed playing Cantor Haig. I enjoyed playing Dr. Grigori. Neither of those people had even remotely as good a life as I do. And they couldn't, right? Because they're garbage protagonists in a shitty universe whose core method is coercion and violence, right? The thing that this person needs to do is rebuild their life and use role-playing games to help cushion that, but not to look at role-playing games as a replacement for their own happiness. And I'm afraid that's what's going on here. So before you have your first session back in your college town with your old friends, have another session 0, right? You've learned some things in your year of long absence. You've learned some things about role-playing games. So have another session 0 and be like, listen, this is what the game is about. This is what Dungeons and Dragons does. Right? Is that okay? Is everybody going to buy into that? Are we all on board? But this is tough, right? It's tough. I can fully empathize with what your friend wants and needs. I can see why you could get caught up in a beloved character with a happy... That phrase is going to fucking haunt me, Jordy. Beloved character that had the happy life she didn't get to have. That's a huge red flag for everybody involved. So here's the thing, Jordy. Talk to your players, right? Talk to this person. Tell her, this is what Dungeons and Dragons is about. These are the kinds of things that happen in Dungeons and Dragons. If this is not okay for you, we could try a different game, right? Try Golden Sky Stories. That is a game where you can overcome challenges. You can do cool, fun stuff. There are risks and there are dangers, but the stakes are different, right? The stakes are different. And that's what you need to do. You need to be like, in Dungeons and Dragons, death is one of the things that is at stake, right? Happiness may well. Loss is a thing. The game's rules don't care about your husband or daughter. The game's rules don't care about how happy your character is. They want to know how effective you are at combat. So just let them know. Lay it out. And if she says to you, I want to play, but I don't want you to change the game, but I don't want anything bad to happen to me, you need to say, that's not possible. You are making demands of me and of this game that are not possible, period. I cannot turn lead into gold. This is what we have, right? And then offer alternatives. And I hope that this person is comfortable enough to say, I am not in a position to safely play Dungeons and Dragons right now. And in a way, Jordy's friend, that is the only way for you to protect your beloved character. Do not play them. Retire them from duty. Pull them off stage, put them in a nice safe cottage somewhere, and don't play them, because the more you play them, the more likely they are to get in danger. Play something different, step away from the table for a while, get some therapy, work through your life stuff, and when you are stable again, return to the table and give it another try. A piece of, it's not even advice, but a maxim that I heard recently about mental health, and this is something that has been rolling around in my brain ever since I heard it, and that I would like to continue to pass on to you. The thing to remember here for those of us who suffer from depression and anxiety and mental health stuff, it's not our fault, but it is our responsibility, right? Part of living with depression, depressive episodes, going through hard stuff is that it's not your fault that you suffer from this stuff and people should be empathetic about it, but it's your job to make it better. It's your job to live a life that is satisfying and happy for you, whatever that takes. So, Jordy, have empathy for your friend. Take care of yourself. Put up your boundaries. Play your game. Tell this person what's at stake. Listen to them. If they buy in, take your role seriously. Do not let them blame you for that anxiety. Understand where they're coming from. And honestly, encourage them to get help. Encourage them to take a step back from the game. But if you and the other people in your group are this person's friend, there are ways to support them outside of the game, right? If you end up in a position where they leave the game and you keep playing, they're going to feel left out and it's going to maybe trigger depressive episodes. So support them other ways, right? Offer to drive them to counseling, right? Offer to hang out with them. Spend time with this person outside of this, honestly, kind of like dangerous situation for them. Don't play Dungeons and Dragons if you're afraid of losing things, because loss is a part of the game. Find games you can play together, right? Play board games, play card games, play role-playing games that don't have such high stakes. And hopefully, eventually, Jordy, your friend will feel comfortable and ready to return to the table and pick that sword up, pick up that spell book once more, and head out into the world. I always feel like such a curmudgeon when I think about these groups of people who are like, yeah, our role-playing game, our Dungeons and Dragons campaign is like just a bunch of friends and we just like hang out in the forest and like sometimes we make skill checks and we never really get any fights and it's just like a wholesome good time. And I hate it. I hate it. Like, I'm happy that they're happy, but I fucking hate it because it's like, that's not the game. The game doesn't deserve any of your happiness. It doesn't get credit for that. That's you. Play something different. It just gets to me. I don't want people to stop being happy and obviously have fun doing whatever thing you want to do. But like, that's not what this game was designed for. Anyway, I find it frustrating. Have the fun you're having, but don't tell me about how Dungeons and Dragons is a game that isn't what it is. I know. I've played lots of it. I understand. Anyway, Jordy, you're doing good. Keep it up. Have empathy. Work with your players. Try a different game. That's, again, archetypal advice. So our second question comes from Nico. And it's a little all over the place, but I think we'll be able to find the question in here. You can help me.
Hi Adam, this is Nico calling in from Bogota, Colombia. I've been a long-time listener, and I really wanted to thank you for all the advice you've put out during your office hours ever since you started this some years ago. Your advice has proven incredibly useful to my growth as a GM and as a student of the wonderful subject that is RPGs. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. I'm gearing up to GM a Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition one-shot for a group of strangers. Of course, right away I know that this premise might already have triggered a lot of red flags for you. Thanks to you, and thanks to playing games designed by Vincent Baker, John Harper, I think I understand and share the same concerns about the flaws in Vampire's design as you likely do. I get them. I get why the game doesn't always work in favor of what it claims to be about. By the same token, I'm empowered by all of your great advice to make it work. I think I can tinker with its systems and make it do what I want it to do for my players. The lore is there, and the brand recognition draws in the players. I aim to at least fail spectacularly. My question is, in a game like Vampire the Masquerade, or Blades in the Dark, or Band of Blades, where many of its main mechanisms are geared towards creating meaningful narrative at a campaign level, how do I make sure that the reward structure of the game and the long-term consequences of their actions create meaningful play at the session level? In my case specifically, how do I make sure that the loss of humanity, the acquisition of debts, and the breaches to the masquerade that occur through the session matter for a contained one-shot? And experience points, how do those factor into a one-shot with no advancement? Aside from my specific case, I'm also curious to know how you would run a game like Band of Blades as a one-shot. How would you make the Legion phase of the game matter in the one-shot? My instinct tells me that maybe a solution lies in having the last challenge of the session be influenced by all these things. This last scene, the last obstacle, contingent on how well they did the things they were supposed to do as players, playing vampires, playing legionnaires. But I'm extremely curious to know your thoughts. Sorry for the long question. I think that context is important and it might give you additional stuff to talk about. Thank you for your time.
You're very welcome. I'm excited to answer this question because I think the real question here is sort of buried. I kind of like it when questions solve themselves throughout, right? Like the question asker here, Nico said, I'm gearing up to play Vampire the Masquerade. I know that Vampires maybe not the best designed games. I've played better designed games. Here are the reasons why I want to play it. Here's what I'm going to do to try to make it work. The end. The first 3 paragraphs, you ask and answer your own question. Don't feel bad about playing bad games. If we were not allowed to play bad games, I would not have a job, right? We would not have role-playing games as a hobby, right? To begin with. Like I played Shadowrun first edition for quite a long time in front of an audience, right? You're allowed to play games that aren't perfect because there's no such thing. right? There's no such thing as a perfect game. So if you can make Vampire the Masquerade work for you and for your players, good. Congratulations, you did it. Right? And I believe you. I believe that you can. I could do it too, right? I think I can take bad games and make them work. I think that's a thing. It's part of a certain subset of skills of game mastering. I think that you understand why Vampire is a strong choice, right? You are talking about the same reasons that you were explaining that you want to play Vampire would be the same reasons I would play Vampire, right? Brand recognition, lore, all of the bullshit that is innately tied to Vampire, and all the work is already done, right? I don't love the lore and the brand recognition stuff of Vampire enough to build a whole new game to emulate it with different mechanisms, right? I don't care. I will pick up Vampire and I'll run it if that's what I want to run. And you want to run Vampire, so fucking run Vampire. Do it, right? You are allowed. I think that with the right group, with a little energy and the right adjustments, you can make the game work. You can make Vampire do what you need it to do. And what's great here is that you're reading and playing games designed by people who have a deeper understanding, I think, of how mechanisms affect narrative. And the things you're learning from John Harper and Vincent Baker, you are going to take those skills and you are going to apply them to Vampire, even if you don't do so intentionally, right? I've said over and over that playing Apocalypse World a lot of the time feels like, at a narrative level, using fronts and adversaries, the way that Vincent gives us advice to do in the game, the way the rules are designed in Apocalypse World to do, feels more like Vampire the Masquerade than any Vampire game I ever played. The interpersonal community drama in a scarcity environment is the same as what's happening in Vampire, right? You belong to a subclass of people who are threatened from the outside and from the inside. You have to deal with several fronts at once in a scarcity environment where you need blood. Blood is hard to come by. Blood is the scarcity in Vampire the Masquerade, right? So these things that you're learning from better games, Apocalypse World, Dogs in the Vineyard, Agon, Blades in the Dark, all of these things have things that they can teach you about being a better game master, and then you can use those skills to make Vampire the Masquerade work. Now, for you, friend Nico, for you, it's going to depend, right? It's going to depend on your personal style and what your comfort level is, and honestly, how much work you feel like doing for this group. If you're doing a one-shot of Vampire the Masquerade and you want to create a framework for yourself, you could make a list of moves. You could steal from Apocalypse World. You can make a list of moves and say, when I'm not sure what to do, make one of these moves. And I think that this is a great thing you can do for literally any role-playing game, right? Go through the role-playing game and try to figure out what your agenda, your principles, and your moves are in that game, right? If you were to play Vampire the Masquerade as if it were Apocalypse World, what would your priorities look like? What is your job as the game master in Vampire the Masquerade? What kinds of things would you need to do from moment to moment to push that game forward to the place you want to get it to, right? And this is a form of, it's like soft hacking. There's this nebulous space, and experienced game masters will I think agree with me. And if I've got my head up my ass, let me know. But I think that there is this nebulous space of game design and GMing behavior that overlap with each other, where you're not quite designing a new game. You're not quite hacking a game, but you're applying your game master knowledge from a bunch of different games, your own personal style, to a game that already exists and bending how you do it. You can see if you watch me do it, I do this all the time with Dungeons and Dragons. Like, I GM Jace Beleren Must Die like it was a Dungeon World game, right? The mechanisms of the game predominantly are still flat 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, but the way I think about adversity, the way I punish failures, the way that I do granular success, the way I think about the whole game's narrative structure is highly informed by Dungeon World, because that's the kind of flavor I want it to have. So if you come to Vampire the Masquerade and you GM it from your head, not from the book, but you GM it from your head like it's a Burning Wheel game or like it's an Apocalypse World game, it's going to feel different, right? And that's what constitutes GM style. That's what feels like your voice, right? Your voice is informed by all of the other things that you have learned by playing and reading other games. So that is what's empowering you. That's what's putting Nico in a position to play Vampire the Masquerade and make Vampire really sing. But like I said in the last question, and like I've said a bunch of times, Vampire won't get any credit for that, right? If I watched Nico GM and it was a brilliant game, I wouldn't necessarily credit Vampire the Masquerade. I would be like, oh, I noticed how you were using everyone's philosophy as the beliefs, and you were treating them like Burning Wheel characters, right? I think if you GM Vampire the Masquerade as if you were GMing a different, better game, you can really get a lot of mileage out of it. So that's the first part of the question, right? Like basically just, yes, you can play Vampire the Masquerade. You're good to go. Like, don't worry about it. You don't need anybody's permission. I think that you can take bad games, and if you know enough about better games, if you are a talented game master, an experienced game master with players who are going to support you, you're going to be fine. You're going to get through it. No problem. The second part of the question is how to make one-shots meaningful, right? How to make one-shots work when the game is not designed for that, right? A lot of games, especially older games like Vampire the Masquerade, less so Blades in the Dark, less so Band of Blades, right? Less so Dungeon World. But there are games that were designed for campaign play. That is the default assumption. Now, other games, modern games like Fiasco, for example, or Microscope, those are meant to be played as one-shots. So obviously, if you're picking one-shot, choose a game that's going to work for it. You're going to have to do more work to make a game like Dungeons and Dragons or Vampire the Masquerade fit the one-shot mold, but it can be done. So the way that we do this is to break it down into whatever is meant to be accomplished in a single session, right? So in Blades, this is a single job. That's your one-shot, right? Band of Blades, it might be a single leg of the journey. In Vampire, it might be one night, right? Vampire is harder to do because it doesn't have those broken mechanisms. It doesn't break the game up into phases. Not in the same way. But find a single unit of time in which the drama can take place. Focus on that. And that's what your game is about. It's that moment, right? That moment of play. Find for one-shots need constraints, right? You'll notice that usually these constraints come in the form of location, right? It's a one-shot set in a haunted castle that you can't leave, right? They can be time. The one-shot will begin at dawn, and when we get to midnight, the one-shot is over. That's our constraint. It can be narrative, it can be mechanical, but find that thing and only play within that, right? And then reward structure, and I forget to do this sometimes, but treat a one-shot as if it were a session. Like, assume that it is a session already. Pretend like there have already been sessions. Pretend like there are already going to be sessions planned. Don't treat it like this is the beginning and the ending of anything. This is why I think that a cliffhanger is as valid an ending to a one-shot as an actual, like, conclusion, right? You can do the like, well, at the end of the night, everyone's going to die. Everyone who doesn't escape is going to die, right? So you have to get out or else you're toast. So you can do that. You can use the time constraint. But if you're playing a game that is built on a much larger scale by design, you're going to lose some of that granularity, right? Treat it like it's a session anyway. Use the mechanisms, reward experience points, right? Play it anyhow. Start with the action, right? Jump into the action. Play through a single discrete chunk of it and then end it. And you know what? You're going to be doing things. You're going to be investing in the future in a way that is going to feel disingenuous on the game level, right? So it's that whole parable about planting seeds, right? Like, why plant a tree that will not grow fruit in your lifetime? And it's like, well, because I assume there will be a future. So you have to tell your players and you have to treat the world like everyone believes there will be a future, unless it's specifically exempted from them by your premise, right? If your premise is, if you don't get out, you are dead, everyone in the game needs to still pretend like there's going to be a tomorrow. They have to act like that. And in the same way, you as a GM and you as players have to act like there's going to be another session. Now, this doesn't mean take it easy, go slow, leave a bunch of threads untangled. It just means be concise, be focused, and imagine there might be another game. The thing you got to remember in a one-shot is, even in a very long one-shot, a limited amount of things will happen, right? You're going to dedicate some time, 20 minutes, an hour, hour and a half, to rules stuff, looking up rules, figuring out how things work, rolling dice in a non-narrative capacity, right? Rolling initiative, checking out page numbers, doing all that bullshit. That's going to take up some of your time. If everyone in your group gets 20 minutes of screen time where they get to shine, they get one batch of supreme focus time. That's a full hour of your time, right? Already. And then everybody else has scenes. So the thing about a one shot is give out experience, use the mechanisms as they're written. Even if you're handing out experience at the end of the session, if you're geared towards hoping to turn it into a campaign, like you mentioned that you were, this can be really helpful because you can kind of hook them. You can lure them in. You can say at the end of a session, did you know that if we played again, you could spend those 5 experience I just gave you and you could get a new discipline? Yeah, it's pretty fun being able to run around really fast, but you could also speak to animals. You could turn into mist. That's what disciplines are for. So it's a way to kind of didactically approach advancement in the game as if we play again, this is what you could do with these characters. And then a week later, you can email everyone and be like, so, do you want to play again? Right? It's a pretty classic trick, leaving them wanting more. And that is a very specific thing you can do with advancement. I think you just need to treat the game with respect, play it by the rules, and reward players for doing things. This is the thing, right? I'm going to make a sports analogy. Not every game of hockey has to be the Stanley Cup Finals, right? Sometimes you're just running around in the alley behind your house playing street hockey. Nobody's keeping track of the score, but it still matters when someone gets a goal, right? Because if you extrapolate that out, why even play a one shot, right? Why even bother? If you don't care about advancement, why should you care about strength rolls? Why should you care about initiative? Why should you care about character sheets? Why care about anything? It's just a one shot. Nothing fucking matters, right? Street hockey, even if you're not tracking who's got how many points, still counts. It's still hockey. You're still playing. You're still enjoying it. You're engaging the game. You're following the rules, and you're noticing when someone gets a goal. So in the same way, treat your one shot as if it were a real game, because it is. It fucking is. Right? So that's my advice. That's how, there's a bunch of other advice for one shots, but for making it count, making a one shot count, treat it like it counts. Right? Don't let one shot nihilism get the best of you. People are going to want experience. People love experience, even if it doesn't matter. Right? Even if it's like a carnival prize. Winning the prize at the carnival is the fun part, not the prize itself. You're not going to cherish that giant Kermit the Frog stuffed animal for your whole life. Probably. It'll probably end up in a garage sale or whatever. But the fact that you won it by knocking over a bunch of pegs with a rigged baseball, that's a big deal. So reward people for doing the things the game demands about them, right? Give them that opportunity to be victorious. Because if you take advancement out of a game that is built to provide it, it can feel unsatisfying when you're not given that reward. So, just because the questions don't matter and the points are made up doesn't mean it isn't fun to get 1,000 points. So our last question comes from Astray Jose, and there's a little bit of overlap, and I'm going to focus on, I think some of my advice for Nico applies to Jose as well, but I'm going to focus on a specific part of this question once we get to it. So here we go.
Hello, Adam. Astray Jose has a question for you. My regular RPG group is willing to give any game a shot. It is a mix of people with different experiences, from those who are just getting into RPGs to people who have played for years. Right now, we're finishing a D&D campaign and switching to Scum and Villainy, the Firefly meets Blades in the Dark game. Now, due to your RPG first look of Band of Blades, I decided to pick that game up and read it myself. As I read the book, the mechanics, the setting, and the art all filled me with excitement to play this game. However, Band of Blades seems to be a game that favors more troupe play. Now I, out of my own general ignorance and excitement, introduced my players to the game Companion's Tale earlier this year. That game is arguably very heavy in that troupe play style, and that was their first encounter with it. I did not realize that until a quarter of the way in, and it left a sour taste in their mouth for that style. Now, I have talked to my players, and we agree that it may not be the right game for us right now, but are willing to try later in the future. Other than nudging my players to switch characters when they overindulge in their vice, what are some practices I, as the GM, can do to help my players feel more comfortable with troupe play? If you have any more beginner-friendly games that can do troupe play, I would love to know. Thanks, and have a good one.
Thank you, Jose. So troupe style play, that's the thing that I want to focus on. Not so much like one-shots or Band of Blades specifically or any of that stuff, but what makes a good troupe style game? Now, I think that most people, when they think of RPGs and they think of troupe style play, at least my generation of RPGers, we think of Ars Magica. Ars Magica, I think, and I'm gonna just say something that may be factually incorrect, but I think Ars Magica is the first role-playing game where troupe style play is a given, like an inherent part of the play. And what troupe style play is there is a batch of characters. So imagine you sit down with your, we'll use a D&D analogy. Imagine you sit down with your D&D group, and instead of everyone making one character, the group as a whole makes like 10 characters, right? You make a fighter, you make a wizard, you make a sorcerer, you make a bard, you make a paladin, you make a different paladin, you make a barbarian, you make a bunch of different characters. And then you say, all right, so for this adventure, Adam is going to be the dungeon master, and Blue Jay, Elf, Lauren, and Dave will select characters from the pool of 10. So this adventure is going to be a high seas adventure with swashbuckling and a cave fortress on a hidden island. You're going to have a boat, and you're going to be, you're going to be going and exploring the misty sea looking for treasure, right? So Dave might pick the fighter. Let's be honest, Dave will pick the fighter. Blue Jay might pick a cleric. Lauren picks a thief, and Elf plays a sorcerer. And you do that adventure, and at the end of that adventure, you say, good job, everybody. Level up those characters and return them to the pile. Next adventure, Blue Jay is going to GM, and I'm going to go on vacation, and I'm not going to be able to make it. So it's going to be Blue Jay as the GM, and Dave, Lauren, Elf, and Andrew are going to play, right? Now, Elf might want to play that spellcaster again, but she's also allowed to play the rogue or the paladin or the barbarian, because none of the characters belong to anyone. They are group characters. They belong to the group. Now, they may live on Pirate Island with the rest of the group, but they're going to form a different... It's a bit like a West Marches approach, but instead of West Marching the players, you West March both the GM and the character roles. So it feels a bit more like a comic book where it's... Yes, we have all designed Wolverine together, but a Brian Michael Bendis Wolverine is going to be very, very different than a Todd McFarlane Wolverine, but they both might get a chance to write that character. And this is how we get characters that vary, that are different. We see people show off different arcs, and you can do this in any game. I just gave a Dungeons and Dragons description. The way this works in Ars Magica is a 14th century, 13th century. You can't even say Dark Ages anymore. Early medieval, middle classical. I don't know. I'm not a fucking historian. But Ars Magica, you play wizards. You create your wizards, and those are, I believe, your own personal character, right? So this is the thing. So your personal character belongs to you. I might be Lord Blackwing, Grave Necromancer, right? So that's my character, and Lord Blackwing is served by servants, by an apprentice, by grogs, by characters that do things for that character. And so your magi is your own personal character, but different arcs of the game focus on different ones. Usually only one person plays their wizard, right? So it might be that today Dave is the GM, and I am playing Lord Blackwing. And as a result, Lauren, Blue Jay, and Elf will be playing Lord Blackwing's servants, assistants, and apprentices, right? Companions, maybe my bodyguard or whatever. And so this arc is a Lord Blackwing arc, and then we get to play as that, and then we move on and we play a different character, and then they're grogs, and those guys can move around. And you don't have to play them the same. Like if somebody played my bodyguard the first Lord Blackwing arc, or whatever, and they didn't really like it, someone else could just play them. They're not as important as the magi in the group. And I think that you can do this. You can do this with Band of Blades. You can do this with, honestly, with a little work, literally any role-playing game. I think we have this idea that our characters belong to us, but it can be so much fun watching someone else play your character. And I think about this a lot for my long established shows. Like, how much fun would it be to do a Court of Swords episode where Max plays Ramus and Zeke plays Maharib and JP plays 10 Pill. Like we shift everybody around. Like, how much fun would that be? This is that moment where you get, it's the Bellatrix Lestrange Hermione Granger moment, right? So this idea that the character belongs to the group, and you get to see what happens when someone else tries to interpret your character. So I like the idea of troupe play. I think it's really cool. We've never really done a troupe style campaign, but we could. It wouldn't be that hard. So the question becomes, how do I help my players feel more comfortable with it? I think the big gap, the big thing to get through with troupe play is, this character is mine. There are others like it, but this one is mine. Don't fucking touch Wolverine. He's mine, right? Think about it more like a comic book. Approach it that way. Talk about it during session 0 and say, this is a game in which you do not own your character, right? We all make the characters. The group owns the characters. And you get to play somebody different. Now, you got to understand the game. I think Burning Wheel doesn't work troupe style. It really doesn't. Burning Wheel doesn't work troupe style because Burning Wheel demands hyper focus on a single character. Right? You have to really deeply understand and care about your character. It takes fucking 50 sessions to get them from where they are to where you hope maybe they'll end up. It takes so much work and energy that derailing that, the characters are projects, right? But in a game that's a little looser, like Band of Blades or Blades in the Dark or fucking Dungeons and Dragons, you're good to go, right? Rewards all work the same. You do rewards based on the session. Like if a character dies, I guess we kind of did this a little bit with Old School Adventures. I think almost everybody in that group got to play Chunk Flunkins at least once. Our pretty boy Chunk. And the characters accumulate XP, not the players. Now you could, if you really wanted to go weird with it, you could assign experience to the players. But that would require a very different game, I think, because the characters would level or change as you play them. So I don't know. The thing is like you can do this. I think you can do this with Dungeons and Dragons. You don't even have to jump into some big weird story game. The idea is just teach your players that You don't have to take total ownership over a character. You work with the group to build the character together, and today or this session or for this week or whatever, however long the length of time is, this is the arrangement, and then it's going to shift next time. I think it's fun. I think it's very freeing to get an excuse to play somebody different. This can be the kind of thing that helps prevent like weird, intense, like attachment to characters. It can encourage play that is a little more free, because if a character dies, it's not a huge deal. And in fact, it's fun because you get to be the person that was playing them when they died. But yeah, it's a different vibe and it requires a different kind of group. So describe to your group what your plans are, and then introduce this through whatever game is already comfortable for them. I hope that helps. I know it's a big topic, but troop style play is cool. And yeah, add that to my list of things I want to do. I want to do an Aegon one shot. I want to do a 1-player, 1 GM Burning Wheel game. I still want to play Zweihander. I want to there's so many fun things to do. But troop play is definitely a thing that I would love to show off. I think it'd be a cool campaign to do. And then people don't need to buy in quite so deep. They can be like, I'm really only available for 3 months. So I will jump in and I will play this character for 3 months. And at the end of that arc, I have to go. You can replace me. Someone else could play my character, right? So imagine how much fun that could be. Imagine like you get insight into a character in a way that you never would if one person played them the same all the way through. So yeah, great questions today. Thank you again to Jose, to Nico, and to Jordy all for coming and for submitting these questions. You're the best. There would literally be no show without you. I always need questions. So if you think your question is too small or too irrelevant or isn't really a question, you just want me to discuss something, please go to my website, www.adam-cole.com, click on the office hours link, fill out the form. Don't be scared off by the Vocal-roo thing. If you don't want to record your voice, that's totally okay. Submit your question, and I would love to answer it in a future episode of Office Hours. Thanks for coming, everybody. This has been episode 89. You have been a delight. I hope you were entertained and that you are fired up to go and play some role-playing games, because God knows I am. We'll see you next time, everybody.